Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Did you know that the white pumpkin is seen as a symbol of pregnancy and infant loss? This is based on a poem that is written by Jennifer Giles. This is how the poem goes. This is the story of a pumpkin of white. What is its place on this autumn night? Amidst all the orange and colors of fall, it seems out of place, not belonging at all. But oh, what a place, and oh, what a story. You see in its face lies the image of glory. Of babies so small, so incredibly tiny, perfect in purpose, their souls shining brightly. No less a baby, a child just the same, as one who is held and called by their name. Was my baby a he, or was she a she? What would my child have grown up to be? Yet bigger than questions and what ifs and whys is the comfort they feel when they look to the skies. For their hope is the truth that they so tightly cling. I'll know all the answers, understand everything, on the day that God hands my child back to me. This pumpkin is sweet baby boys and girls who never opened their eyes to this world, never cried, never feared, protected from pain, touched by their innocence, were never the same. Lives perfect and pure, all things lovely and sweet, and we honor them here till heaven we meet. This pumpkin is all of the sweet little ones whose lives, although short, were covered in love, and kisses and snuggles, rocking and playing, their parents not knowing they wouldn't be staying. But the time that they had they would never trade, even if they could be saved from the pain. Their cribs may be empty, but the promise remains. One day they'll hold their babies again. This pumpkin is for all these sweet angel friends whose parents all know this isn't the end. And how they are doing tonight up in heaven is better than anything we could imagine. Though we're missing our children and we're still on this side, our hearts will continue to swell with pride at the special, the wondrous, the out-of-place things, like this white pumpkin and the joy that it brings. A reminder that our children are more than alive. They are perfectly whole. All things are made right. Angel parents, I know there's still tears to be shed, but I hope that this pumpkin brings peace instead. Our babies are promised forever in heaven, and that's the best gift we could ever be given. I just think it's such a beautiful and meaningful poem for all of us lost parents. And in honor of next month being Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, I have some white pumpkin apparel that is available. If you purchase it through September 14th, you can get it in time to wear for October. You can see all of the options at www.bonfire.com/white-pumpkin160/, or check out my posts on social media at Journey for Jasmine for that link. Today I am talking with Karla. She is a certified maternal wellness coach, fertility coach, and breathwork facilitator. In this episode, she discusses the grief of losing her daughter Paloma, along with having multiple early losses. She also talks about going through the IVF process before she started to take control of her own health. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Karla. Karla, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, good morning. Yes, my name is Karla. I'm a lost mama and also a mama of two rainbows. And I spent 20 years working in finance in New York City. And about a year and a half ago, I decided to follow my heart project. And I became a certified health and wellness coach. I'm also a breathwork practitioner and a Reiki healer. And the reason why I decided to take this path is because 10 years ago, we lost my daughter Paloma, and it was the most heartbreaking event. I couldn't ever imagine that that would have happened. And really, at that moment and in the years after, felt like I didn't get the right support from the medical community and from the community surrounding me, not because that didn't want to support me, but I don't think that they knew how. And so I really feel that there's such a big gap between medicine and healing. And that's really where my work comes in. I really want to help women on this path because I know you can feel so alone. And I know when I was there, I felt like I really needed a helping hand. And so that's really my heart project right now. And that's really what I want to help women with now.
That's definitely quite a transition from finance to this side of things. What kind of or what made you interested in going that route specifically? Is it something you've always liked doing or just something that kind of came to you or
Well, to be perfectly honest, I mean, I ended up in finance just because I got an internship at Merrill Lynch and then I kind of just ended up there, right? I'm first generation, a lot of pressure to be independent, make money. I had a lot of boxes that I needed to check, but it never fulfilled me in my soul level. And I think when I lost my daughter so tragically, something definitely opened up within me. And I knew I couldn't ignore this anymore. And I knew that I always wanted to help people. I just wasn't sure why. And my husband is the one who actually said to me, while we were on lockdown during the pandemic, he was like, Carla, you have so much experience. And I'm sure we'll talk about this throughout the podcast. But yes, my first pregnancy was a stillborn, and then we continued to suffer through more losses. We had more early term miscarriages, and then we conceived naturally with my daughter, and then we had more losses. And so my OB at that point, I was 35, of that advanced maternal age. They like to label women geriatric, high risk. So I was all those labels. So he thought it would be best that I just jump to IVF. And everything was supposed to work. Everything was perfect. We had genetically tested embryos, but after 2 failed rounds, we were not successful. And so my husband and I came to the very difficult decision that we just couldn't continue. We couldn't push ourselves emotionally, physically, mentally, financially. And so we weren't sure what was going to happen, but that's really where everything changed for me. My doctor said that I needed a surrogate at that point, and I knew in my heart that I didn't, and I knew that I had to go back to the beginning, to really process the trauma and the grief that I was holding for so many years, surrounding the death of my daughter. And, when I started to do that work and I stepped into that healing that led me to feel more empowered and trust my body and forgive my body, I was able to conceive my son at 41 naturally and gave birth to him at 42. So
that's amazing. Oh, I hate those labels so much. I was 35 in my last pregnancy and yeah, I love seeing geriatric pregnancy on every form that I have.
I know. And you know what? I really, it makes you feel a certain way,
Mhm.
because then you begin to question you. Like for me, I had been through so much trauma with my pregnancies. And then to have those labels, it made me feel like, oh my God, had I waited too long? Like, is this my fault? Like, is this the reason why I'm having all these issues? And it's just like putting all this blame on yourself too, and all these labels, they really do a disservice to women. It's not empowering to women. It's not making women feel safe. If anything, it's putting you kind of on your heels, like you're already in that anxious, worried state, which we all know is not great for conception nor good for the pregnancy.
I never really thought about it that way, but it's true. I mean, because every time I saw that term, it made me think like, oh, I shouldn't be pregnant right now. Like I shouldn't be doing this. Like it made it feel like you said, like it was like I did something wrong.
Yeah, I really felt that way. And then also, they would ask how many pregnancies have you had? How many live births? So it was having to repeat that as well. That was very traumatic for me as well. And I just think that, I've had many conversations with my OB. I think him and I have been trying to work together to try and make um, the environment surrounding, conception and loss a little more supportive. But he didn't even think of these things. They're so busy, right? And they're bringing all these babies into the world and they have so many patients, but they don't understand how these processes that are in place that are so old and antiquated really affect women and in their mental and emotional health.
Yeah, I try really hard to not place full blame on doctors because I know a lot
Yeah,
of them are just doing what they're trained to
yeah.
do, like, but it is very frustrating when it's like, well, how do you change that? You have to like change their training, I guess.
Well, I think what it is, and I think that brings a really interesting point, is that we need to be our own best advocate in this position. And I think when I was going through this, especially, I felt this very much in IVF, that like I wanted to be the model patient. I didn't want to ask too many questions. I didn't want to take up too much of his time. I wanted him to like me. I wanted it to work. I was willing and begging it to work. But in that moment too, when he didn't want to change the protocol, or when he told me that I needed a surrogate, I didn't speak up for myself. I didn't. And I realized that down the line that I should have, because nobody knows your body better than you do. And your opinion matters. You shouldn't be in the passenger seat for this whole ride. You deserve to be in the driver's seat along with your partner and along with your doctor. It's more of a group effort as opposed to you just being directed. And I felt that a lot. And I understood that looking back, that really my voice was taken from me because I felt like someone had to fix me. And I understood that nobody needed to fix me. I needed to heal. There was nothing wrong with me. I was whole, but I just needed to get back to that place where I could trust myself and feel safe within my body.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like infertility is something that definitely takes that trust away, both infertility and loss. You just feel like, I mean, you just want to be pregnant, so you'll just do whatever the doctor says. Like, you don't want to, okay, he says this is what I need to do to make it work. And, you're afraid to advocate for yourself, like you said. I mean, I struggled with that too. I think a lot of us
Yeah.
do.
A lot of us do, yeah, absolutely, because it's ingrained within us women too to kind of just, take a back seat, or, the doctors in the white coats know best. They've had all the clinical training, which is absolutely true. I'm not saying that we shouldn't take their advice. Clearly, we all do, but we need to also tune in to our inner intuition and our inner knowing, and step into that power too, because that matters. Because when I walked into that um, fertility clinic in New York City, I felt it right away. I just felt like this isn't for me. Like, and even though everything worked and we had genetically tested embryos, and when you go in for a transfer, your lining should be a certain thickness, everything was perfect, and it still didn't work. And I knew it. I knew it going in. But I still pushed forward. This is what they told me to do. If I work hard enough, if I do what they tell me, and everything lines up, then it should work, right? It it didn't. So I learned a lot in that process. I learned a lot in these 10 years, and I think that's why my husband was like, you should do this. You could help women. There's so much that you know. I don't know many women who have had a stillbirth, early miscarriages, failed IVF, geriatric pregnancies. I mean, that's a lot.
It
And
is.
like, and I can't believe, and sometimes I feel like it was a dream, and it's not, because sometimes when I'm laying in the bed with my son who's 2.5, you know I, I feel those waves of grief still. I, I never got those moments with my daughter, and so it's such a beautiful life. It's not perfect, and I certainly wish it would have ended a different way, but I'm still so grateful, because I think not everyone, has the opportunity to have children. Sometimes it just doesn't work. And I know how much pain and trauma and how much wasted money and procedures and blood draws it was super intense. And I don't think that we, as women, as a community, as a culture, really give women the credit to go through all of this to build families.
Well, and people like toss it around so casually, like you're having trouble getting pregnant. Well, just do IVF. Like it's some easy like thing, and it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, that's how it was sold to me, and that's how I say it. Like, IVF is kind of sold as like the insurance. Like it's like your golden ticket. It's not. First of all, it's extremely expensive, even with insurance. And the older you get, the success rates are lower. it takes about 3 rounds. That's a lot of time and money, and not everyone is in, most IVF clinics are around cities too. There are a lot of areas where women don't even have accessibility to these clinics. So my message too is there's a lot of things that women we can do to prepare our bodies and prepare our minds before going to IVF. Or if you can't do IVF, or you don't want to do IVF for whatever personal reasons, or you can't afford it, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the road for you. And I think a lot of doctors kind of, maybe they don't specifically say it that way, but it certainly makes people feel that way.
It does. Like they make it feel like, well, if IVF doesn't work for you, like nothing will, like you're sorry. Like that was your
Yeah.
last chance.
Yeah,
But that's
well, you
not.
know what? No, it's not. I mean, here I am at 41, a couple months later, and boom. But a lot changed, and nobody and my doctor, I mean, obviously they're not going to talk about the mind-body connection, and they're not going to talk about healing your trauma. They're not going to talk about your subconscious self-limiting beliefs, they're not, that's never something that people are going to talk about. And when you have therapy, I mean, I went through a lot of therapy when I lost my daughter, and we talked a lot about what happened, but we never really got into the real trauma of it, the trauma that's held within your body. I always felt like energetically something was blocked, and that I was carrying this sadness around me, and it's not that the sadness is ever going to go away, but it certainly feels different. And time helps with that, but also there's a lot of healing work that you can be done. Breath work has been immensely powerful for me, as well as Reiki. It's a combination of so many different things, but I think a lot of people really want to focus on reproductive organs solely, but fertility is really a lot more than that.
So for people who aren't really familiar, like how would you explain like what breath work is and how you work with that?
Well, breath work is really it's a meditative practice, but it helps you drop from the mind into the body because you're simply just doing breathing. There's different breathing techniques, but the one that I specifically practice with my clients is a 3-part breath. And you're once you begin that breathing pattern, your brain kind of starts to shut down because it's focusing on the breathing, and then your body starts to take over, and then you feel certain things within your body. I still practice breath work every day, and I have had many powerful sessions where I feel the vibration specifically around my second chakra, which is where our reproductive organs, where I held my daughter, where my daughter died within my womb, so the trauma still is there, layers and layers and layers deep. So breath work really helps you get to that place of trauma, to release it, because then once we are able to release these heavy emotions, this energy blocks, then you can allow for other things to come in. And I think for me, when we had decided that we weren't going to continue with IVF, it kind of was a moment of freedom for me because I knew that I didn't have to force something anymore that I didn't honestly in my heart believe was going to work. So through breath work, through meditative visualization practices, I began to allow myself to imagine a life that wasn't yet here, but that I could actually feel. So I don't know if you know who Dr. Joe Dispenza is. Do you know who Dr. Joe
I'm not
Dispenza is?
familiar.
He talks a lot about, the mind-body connection and about visualizing things and, calming them down in the future. So, for example, I spent a lot of time when we were doing IVF, not allowing myself to picture this actually working because I was trying to protect my heart. So I was thinking, oh, I'm going to jinx it. I don't want to think about it, hope for the best, prepare the worst, so those are like conflicting thoughts, beliefs, emotions, they're not synchronized. So his teachings and his practices are really like, okay, what is the life that you really want? What is it that you envision? What do you really want? So it's a really simple practice, it's your vision of the future with an elevated emotion. So my vision was always another baby, and the emotion was love, feeling awe, joy, feeling grateful. And it was interesting. I would do these little mental movies every day, and it was always a little boy in this big field, and I would always kind of laugh because in our families, my husband and I, there are so many women. Like, we're women heavy. There are very, very little men. So like a little boy would pop into my consciousness and I would kind of be like, nah, that's not gonna happen. Even the embryos were girls. Like, all of our babies were females. So the fact that this little boy kept popping up and I would see him like in this big field, and then we would be walking down the aisle in his wedding, and then to have all of that come true. We recently bought a house in the suburbs. We have this really huge backyard. And I had this realization that, oh my God, like, this is what I was envisioning, like this little boy, toddler, kind of like fumbling around on his feet, kind of uneasy, running through a field. And I realized that, wow, it is really, really so powerful when you can connect your mind, body, and soul, and you can really heal yourself, and you can bring things to fruition if you really believe and feel that it can happen.
I feel like it reminds me, actually, I was doing acupuncture when I was trying to get pregnant, because we struggled with infertility because I have PCOS. And she would always tell me that, like, visualize, like the egg implanting, like visualize this. And I'm always like, this sounds like weird, but then I started like doing it, and it's, I don't know, it's like these things that you think, how could that possibly work? But they like make these changes you can't always like necessarily see on the outside.
Yeah. Well, we're energetic beings, right? We're all energy. And so that's the thing that, I think it's hard for people to really, because we're trained to be so analytical, we want facts. We want to see proof. But you can't prove any of that. You just have to believe it. But you have to really believe it. You can't just like sort of. You have to really get in there, like, good. That's what I say when I'm talking to women I'm working with. Like, don't hold yourself back. What is that vision that you want? What is it what does it look like? Get into the details. And the most important part is to like allow yourself to feel it. That's the part. Like, when you feel that energy is already all over your body and you're emitting that frequency, and you're going to call what it is that you truly desire. I mean, it may not happen overnight, but I think a lot of people would be surprised in doing this type of work how quickly their desires can come true. For me, it was pretty short amount of time. It was literally about 4 months. It was crazy. And we had, of course, had to have a lot of genetic testing very, very early on. So our son was only 9 weeks when we found it was a boy. My husband didn't believe it. He was like, "There's no way." I'm like, "It's a boy." He was like, I saw him jumping around. you know, it was a beautiful ending to a pretty traumatic story, that lasted for a long, 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 long time. Because I think when you're in the fertility trenches and nothing's going right, it's so easy to slip back into that, to feel those feelings of unworthiness and grief and not knowing how you will dig yourself out of that, like how you will find the strength every day to keep moving forward. It's not for the faint of heart. I give women so much credit, and I understand. It was the hardest thing I will ever do.
Did you have a reason for your infertility? Did they ever like, was it something they knew, or was it like unexplained, or?
Yeah, it was unexplained. It was unexplained. Sarah, we got pregnant really fast after our honeymoon, like the next month, I believe. And then it ended so tragically at 23 weeks. And I think from that moment, and it wasn't just me as well. I think my husband, not I think, I know my husband was traumatized as well. I know my husband had a lot of sorrow, a lot of grief, a lot of fear about, could this happen again? And I think that was really, really blocking us from being able to conceive. And then when you're trying to conceive, it becomes a chore, right? Because then every month you're like, okay, I'm ovulating, and then puts this pressure, and then it really loses. It's hard to connect when you feel so much pressure like that, right? Because you're thinking, is this going to work? Is this the month? Um, are we having sex enough? Are we going to lose another baby? I mean, the things that were going on in my mind, I understand why we didn't conceive, my body was not feeling safe and neither was his. And so we weren't really connected. And so when we conceived my daughter naturally 2 years later, we were actually in Italy, in Positano. And I can say that it was the first time that him and I were energetically connected. We were relaxed. We were having fun. We were enjoying each other's company. We weren't thinking of trying to have a baby. So yeah, I mean, people saying, just go on vacation or just relax, like that drives me nuts, especially for women who have been struggling. Like, oh my God, those platitudes, like if you have not suffered through infertility, please never say any of those things. Never, never. Just find
Just
another way to
don't.
support women. No, 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 I know. There's so many other things that you can say to support people that are on this path.
Do they know what caused your stillbirth?
It was a placenta abruption. Hmm. Yeah,
So,
we had,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead. We went in for the 20-week scan and she wasn't growing properly. So they knew she was wrong. Something was wrong. So then we were sent for an amnio, and when the high-risk doctor pulled that needle out of my belly, he knew something was wrong. I don't know how he did, but he did. And then a couple of days later, we were sent to the Children's Hospital Philadelphia, where I spent hours and hours and hours in an ultrasound. Just they kept taking so many pictures. Doctors would come in, cryptically say something about my placenta. And then by the end of the long day, a dutiful doctor, sat us down in this cold conference room and said there's no viability, that we could either choose to end the pregnancy or that we could wait to just see what happened. And I don't know how we made it back to the car. I feel like I blacked out at that moment, but I remember being in the car and knowing that I was not going to terminate my pregnancy. There was no way I was going to do that. And I remember, screaming in horror and pain, God, if you're going to take this child from me, you will do it. I will not make that decision. And we barely made it home. And then I began to bleed. I just felt something and we were rushed to the hospital. And then I gave birth to her, but she had already passed in utero. So it was very, very, very traumatic, very, very painful, but I don't think I was prepared. My doctor and I have talked about this as well. I didn't really know my options. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know that I was even going to give birth to her. I didn't know I was going to have to push. I didn't know any of that, and I think we can do a way better job supporting women and telling women what's going to happen and giving them options, because you feel so out of control at that moment that if I was given an option or said, this is what's going to happen, and after you give birth, you can hold her, or you can do this, or you can do that, or what's going to happen after they take her from me, all of those things. I really had a lot of regrets for a long time. Because I didn't know any better, and I think that's also really, really, really important thing, that we really inform families that are losing babies or being informed that there's no viability or even going into the hospital, that you have options, and that the medical community, the staff will support these parents in any way that they need so that they can grieve properly.
I have a lot of regrets too, and for the same reason, I just didn't know. I didn't know these things that I could have done, or but you find out later, and then you're like, oh, I wish I had known that, but you can't get that moment
Yeah,
back.
I know. And that's something that I carried for a long time, because I didn't hold her. And I think, uh, being in this world now, lost moms and grief and, fertility, a lot of women have pictures and they dress their babies or they held them at least. And I think, like, for me, it really weighed so heavily on me, and I really had these moments where I asked my daughter to forgive me, because I didn't know any better, and that, that I love her, and I know that she forgives me, and I know that she knows that I did the best that I could. And if I could have taken all of that back, I would have, or if had I been prepared, it would have looked differently. But I think this is why having these conversations are so important, because we don't talk about it. It's so taboo. Even now, my daughter, she would be 10 years old, and it still makes people uncomfortable to talk about her, that are surrounding me. It's just, there's been progress, I think, but it's still, we have so much more to go. That's why I think, what you're doing is such a beautiful thing, and showing women that, this is what happened to me, this is my story. You can heal, and we can also celebrate also new life coming in as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that it's so important to just share our stories. I mean, I share whenever, and it's not always easy to share. I mean, Jasmine would have been 6. I still get emotional, sharing about her, but I think it's important for us to, for all the reasons that you said, to help people know that they're not alone, that this is a common thing that happens, and to let people know their options and know what to expect.
Yeah. And to also be supported as well, because I think, at least for me, I'll speak just personally, I think after my daughter died, I really didn't know how to deal with all of that pain and that trauma. And so I just really wanted to be alone. I didn't want to talk about it. I felt so much pain, but I was also very ashamed. You know, I'm a woman. I'm supposed to bring life. I didn't protect her, in that moment. Was she in pain? Where is she? Is she okay? You know, a, a lot. That was a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, and it haunted me for a long, long, long time. But I think, the day that she died, a part of me died there with her, but another part of me opened up, spiritually, which I think has been an interesting path. Um, Being able to connect with my daughter in other ways through signs. Um, and I've been in meditation a few times, and I've felt her literally come up to me and hug me with her arms. And being in that meditative state, I knew that there was going to be an end to it, but I didn't want it to end because I didn't want this feeling to end of her hugging me. Really makes me emotional just to think about it. Those moments are so precious. But now more than any, I feel her presence, and I feel her guiding me, and I see all of her signs, and I know she's here. Obviously not physically, but spiritually, I know she's close.
I like to think that they're all looking out after us and just waiting until we get to see them again.
I think so. I think so. I mean, I want to live a long, long, long life. I'm blessed with my 2 rainbows, but when we make it to the other side, I know she's going to be there, and I really look forward to that time too.
Do you have any particular things that you like, signs that you see that make you think of her, or like symbols or anything?
Yeah, she came to me in a dream when she passed in the hospital, and she was a white bird with her wings stretched out, and she said, "Everything's going to be okay, mommy. Everything's going to be okay." She said that as clear as day, and I will never forget that. And when I feel really low, and there were moments where I just didn't know if I was going to be able to be a mom, I would hear those words, "Everything's going to be okay." And then there would be that Bob Marley song, Three Little Birds. That's also a sign. And dimes. She leaves dimes. I was reading this book, Laura Lynn Jackson. She writes about signs and connecting with spirit. And she simply wrote in her book, just ask for a sign. It could be anything, and see what happens. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make it a random thing. I'm going to make it a dime. And it was funny, for the first couple days, I was looking everywhere for a dime and I couldn't find one. I'm like, this doesn't work. This is not real. See, I'm having this inner dialogue in my head. And then I'm going clearing out the washing machine, and at the bottom is a dime. And I just started laughing, laughing, laughing because it's like, it's kind of random. And then I see dimes everywhere. And if anyone sees a dime, they give it to me. They're like, here you go. I'm like, thank you. I have a collection of dimes. What
I
about
love that
you?
though. Yeah, for me it's cardinals. I often see like especially on her birthday, there was a cardinal that I hadn't really seen one around our house, and there's just one that like flew in front of my office window and just like sat there like right where I could see it, and then just like flew away. I was like, oh my gosh, that was her. And then
That was definitely.
also rainbows for me too.
Oh yeah, I know I love rainbows. And I actually have something in my office. I want to show you this because we struggled through IVF. Can you see this? It's a
Yeah.
white bird. It's like a little boy, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
my daughter brought this like $1 store cake topper maybe about 7 years ago. She was a little baby and she's like, Mommy, I brought this for you. And I was like, white bird, little boy with a cross. I'm like,
That's
okay, this is a cake topper, but I'm going to keep this and it's going to be my experiment with the universe, with God, whatever it is that you believe. I'm like, this is a white bird bringing a little boy. If this actually ends up happening, this will be insane. And I have a son. So
that
I
is
really think she brought
amazing.
it. So it's in, yeah, right? I know. My friend told me, she was like, if that actually happens, Carla, that would be insane. And when it happened, she just like, you better guard that cake topper from the dollar store. Put it in a safe. Yeah.
I
I don't
love
know. It's
that
just,
though. Like, what an amazing story.
it's cool, right? I know. These are the things that like, I know it's so painful. It's the most painful thing to lose a child. It goes against the natural order of life. We're not supposed to die. Our children are not supposed to die before us. It's not. But there are beautiful moments like this where they can tell you, Mommy, Daddy, like, I'm okay. I'm here. I'm with you. I'm protecting you. I'm bringing siblings. I'm bringing my little brother for you. Those are the moments that warm your heart, that give you hope. You know, it's not all lost. It's not what you had wanted, but it still can be beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to put it. I mean, it's so hard because we feel like we have to like live the rest of our lives sad, but
Yeah.
don't even, and
Yeah.
just because you decide to, be happy again doesn't mean like you don't love your baby or miss them or, but we don't have to spend every moment like of the rest of our lives being sad.
Yeah, I know. And I feel like when I was trying to have another baby, it's like what I told you earlier on in the discussion, like how are we going to remember Paloma? How are we going to move on? But how are her future siblings going to remember her and honor her? And I'm always blown away by how my children honor her. We were at this historical farm not too long ago. My son, who's 2.5, was walking in this field, and it was a gorgeous field, like at a farm, and he's screaming her name, Paloma, where are you? He's 2.5, and it's just like such a beautiful thing, and every card I get from my daughter, she always writes her big sister in there. And, her card for Mother's Day was, even the ones up there love you. It was just such a beautiful moment because I don't have to worry about, my children not remembering her, my husband. She is part of us, and we remember her every day because she's part of the family. And that was always a fear of mine, that we would forget, not me,
Right.
but people surrounding. And no one's forgotten her. In fact, she's really leading the way for us. She's our little guiding light, and I think that's just a beautiful thing.
I love it when my kids do like say her name or like talk about her, or I only had my son. I didn't have my other two girls when we lost Jasmine. I just had my son, and he was 3 at the time, so he kind of understood what happened, but not like fully until later. But
Right.
yeah, he talks about her. He'll say like, I miss her, and I show him like the pictures we have. And my
Yeah.
5-year-old has just finally like started to understand. I'll be like, you have a big sister, so and I like when they talk about her, even though just like your kids, they weren't here yet when she was born.
Yeah. And I also think it's interesting, my daughter, she's in second grade. Well, she's going to third now. But she, in the beginning of the year, had to stand up and explain a little about herself, her family. And she mentioned she has a big sister, but she's in heaven because she died. And I think a lot of people were taken aback by that. I got a note from the teacher. And, you know, that's also very important to me that she expresses herself and that she speaks her truth because it doesn't need to be scary. It doesn't have to be odd. This is her life. This is her reality. She has an older sister who died, but a lot of us in society and culturally really don't like to talk about these things. And even, we don't want our children talking about these things because they're scary. And my message too is that it doesn't have to be scary because it's actually quite normal. How many women have miscarriages? How many women have stillbirths? The numbers are large,
Yeah.
And so we start to normalize this for our families and we normalize it for our children. And we normalize the idea of our children still being able to have memories or connecting in their own, specific ways, in their own personal ways with their siblings that are not here on this earth, but, are up in heaven. I think it's a beautiful thing. At first I was like, oh God, she mentioned that in school. Like, what are people gonna think? I had that knee-jerk
Right.
reaction myself, because I want her to fit in and I don't want her to be weird, like, but no, I'm so proud of her. I'm so proud of her for speaking her truth and feeling that connection just as strongly. It's what I've always wanted, and it really it makes me so happy.
I've had that a couple of times where like my son will say something about it, like in front of other people, like even with me there. And I'm like, wait, no, I didn't want to have this conversation right now. But then I do like that, it's our reality. Like you said, it's our life, it's our family. So how is it any different than saying like my grandma's in heaven than saying
Yeah.
my sister's in heaven or.
I know. I know. I 100% agree. And so it's funny how both of us even have the same reaction and we've been through this, right? So we know this at a very intimate level and still we're like, because think about it, that's so deeply ingrained within us. So
Mhm.
we're fighting against like what we've been taught and what we've known. So, and we're trying to say, no, we're going to talk about it. You have this podcast, you have your account, that speaks of this all the time, like all the advocacy work you're doing. And still we're like, ooh, maybe we don't talk about that, So it's like, yeah, healing. It's a daily practice. That's part of our practice. We catch ourselves and then we're like, no, we stand firm in this. We're going to speak about it because it's
Yeah.
not taboo and
But
it's
you're
not
right.
scary.
Even after all the times that I'm sure we've both like shared our story and all that, yeah, I still like sometimes go, wait, we can't. Oh, wait, no, yes, I can. Like
Yeah, that's why I was so excited to talk to you about it because like you're not going to squirm or feel awkward. Like I can say really what I want to say and I know that you will receive whatever I'm saying in a supportive way where I'm not going to scare you or put you off or make you feel uncomfortable, and that's freeing,
Mhm.
just being able to speak from my heart, knowing that I could tell you exactly what happened to my daughter and that you'll support me and then you'll listen to me and you'll understand
Yeah.
that there's so much power in that. There's so much power in community and being heard and having women say, me too, I understand. And I'm so sorry for your loss, but I'm here to support you, or I'm here to be a listening ear, or no matter what you tell me, you're not going to scare me, all those things I think are so important. And that's why I'm so happy to see a lot of people doing this type of advocacy work because it's just so important.
The worst thing I'll do is cry with you. Instead
I
of being
know.
comfortable, I'll just cry.
I know. I mean, it's so interesting to get to know women in this little club. You get to know their children's names and you think, like when I was going through this, I didn't know anyone
I
going
didn't
through
either.
this. I felt like I was just like uh, ostracized. Like her her baby died, like don't look at her. It's like a car accident when you're going by and you don't want to look, you're curious but you don't want to look too hard because God forbid it happened to you. I felt like I had this scarlet letter, and it was so hard for me to express my emotions, and so all of that got trapped in my body and I carried it for so long until I realized that I couldn't carry it any longer. I couldn't. I needed to free myself of all those emotions that I were carrying that I just that were not my fault. I had, and that is the, that is, that was the most important thing that I learned, that I needed to become aware of how I was thinking of myself and how I was blaming myself and how they were making me feel and how I was moving through this earth and what type of wife I was, mother to my daughter. I wasn't fully living because I was still carrying on to so much pain, and I'm not to say that this pain ever goes away. Definitely not. In March, she turned 10 years old. I cried like baby, I cried the whole day because I miss out on those moments. It's still so unfair to me. It's absolutely unfair. How did this happen? It still will never make sense. Never make sense. But I think you and I are a little further along in our journeys where there are many more moments than not that I think of her and I smile. I think of her and send her my love. When I think of her, and I wouldn't take back 1 minute, you know? 1 minute. Even those 23 weeks that I had to carry her, I will treasure forever, forever.
Yeah, I would never give up the short time I had with her either. When is her birthday?
March 19th. So this is another interesting story. So my daughter, Isabella, is born March 16th. And so my OB and I were scared that they would have the same birthday, death date. So he said to me, Karla, we don't want that to happen. I was like, no, I agree. I don't want them to have the same birthday, death date. So he said, if Isabella doesn't come, we'll have to induce you. So I was induced on the 15th and I gave birth to her on the 16th. But isn't that just so crazy? Because, when I lost Paloma, I was like, I hate March. It's the worst month. Every March 19th is going to be it's going to be doomsday. I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm going to hide in like underneath my covers. Everyone leave me alone. And then boom, the universe, God sends me a little blessing like the same week. So it's like, talk about polar opposite of emotions, but, ever since Bella's been born, we celebrate Paloma by throwing flowers into whatever body of water that is nearby. So she's always been part of the celebration, and we celebrate her birthday, and then we celebrate Paloma's life too. So in one little week.
Yeah, I feel the same way about March. Jasmine was also born in March. So she was March 11th.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Oh,
my birthday is also in March. So it kind of took away, like I was like, oh no, I hate this month now. Like I don't even want to celebrate my birthday anymore. This month is
yeah.
stupid.
I I know. See, look at that. We all feel the same things.
I was like, can we
It
just
feels good to
pretend it
like
doesn't
say them out
exist?
loud.
It does.
I know. Yeah,
Well, because
it
then it
does.
sounds weird, like in your head when you're thinking about it, you're like, okay, am I being ridiculous for like hating a whole month? But then you're like, nope, everybody else who has had a loss does too. It's okay.
Yeah, right? It feels good to be like, no, you're not crazy. Hate that
Right.
month.
So if people wanted to find out more information about what you do or connect with you, where would they go for that?
Mostly on Instagram is my number one platform. You can follow me at Karla, Karla.Levitt. I share my story there, which has been interesting and difficult, I think, to be sharing some very, very dark, deep emotions, but also to be sharing my story of hope and healing has been new for me, but mm, incredibly freeing as well, And it's interesting when you start posting things and sharing your story, the amount of people that will come to you who you had no idea were suffering or had dealt with loss. And I'm just like, wow, had I known, we could have supported one another or we could have chatted, but it's all shrouded in secrecy. So yeah, I'm sharing my story there. I'm sharing what I've learned. No gatekeeping. Everything that I'm learning, I want to share with women because I know it's such a hard road. And I know it's highs and lows, and we need more support. We need more women sharing their story. We need more women supporting each other. We need real tools to get past the pain and the trauma. Really, we need to really learn how to work with that pain. Because talk therapy is obviously very beneficial, but then often women are left feeling, what next? So
Right.
there's a lot to do.
Yeah,
There's a lot to
definitely.
do.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Karla, for sharing your story with us. I think this story is such an important reminder that we always remember to advocate for ourselves. It's something we've talked about a lot on the show, but something that so many of us have to learn how to do, myself included. I've gotten better since going through my losses, but it's still something that I struggle with. We often just trust our doctors to know what they're doing and to know what's best for us. But remember, they can't know everything about everything. And we need to speak up when we don't agree with something, when we have questions, or when we feel like there's other options. We know our body better than anyone else. So don't be afraid to speak up and ask questions. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.